Hey everybody, thanks for watching. So real quick for Merkabah Scholar Society members, make sure you guys check your email. Everybody who registered for the app, you guys will get accepted. Just make sure you guys are using the same email you signed up with. Then the process will be a lot quicker. So link is in the description for anybody trying to join. Also, consultations are ongoing. So link is in the description for that, for anybody who wants to do consultations. For my people who got the Shopify Amazon course, make sure you guys are following those steps. There's going to be more videos going to that Podia. So if you bought the Shopify Amazon course, there'll be more videos added to that to update and to basically go along with those videos. There'll be more steps and more things you guys can use. And you guys won't have to pay for that. That'll be free. It'll just be added to the same download that you have from Podia. You'll see new videos come there. So it's about 2 new videos that's getting ready to come. So make sure you guys stay tuned for those next week. So let's get into this video. Okay, so again, like I said, I'm going to get back into talking about the Hebrew Israelite doctrine and everything like that. Even though I know this seems like it's going to be a sports video, but it's not. I'm just out here. It's a good spot to record. So make sure you guys are watching the videos. I put out a lot of videos already on the Hebrew Israelite doctrine. I have a lot of stuff out on that. But I see from the last video I put out, a lot of people have a lot of questions. And my bad, I know you guys emailed me about this stuff before. It took a minute for me to get to it. I'm getting to it now, but I want to make sure I address some of these questions from a lot of people who had a lot of stuff, a lot of good questions, because it's a lot to get into with the doctrine. It's a lot. It's a lot to really understand and unpack, because the Deuteronomy 28, everything that comes off of that really goes and fits with only Black people, as I talk about. But it's the history of, the Bible going back to the tribes and the people who have been kicking this same we're a Hebrew doctrine for a long time. So I know what's happening. A lot of you guys are seeing how old this doctrine is, or these teachings are. And you're hearing about the Igbo and these other tribes claiming to be Jews or what have you. And a lot of people are basically harping on that, thinking that because it's so old that the doctrine is true. So again, we got to get into context, right? We got to get into understanding the history of the Bible. And the biblical story, again, has never been proven. And the thing is, one, as I broke down in the last video, you guys have to understand, when are you going to put the context of the Black Hebrews telling their story with the actual biblical history, right? When does it meet up? So you're either going to have, before the conquest of Kemet, us having proof of these Hebrew Israelites going out conquering and doing everything they were supposed to do, right? Which we don't have that. Or you're going to have where just poof, out of nowhere, we start getting these stories and this whole findings of the Hebrew Israelite people coupling with the religion. This is what we have. We don't have civilizations, multiple civilizations proven to exist, giving us historical accounts of the biblical Jews. We don't have that. If we had that, then it would give more validity to the story. What we do have is the biblical story, nothing else. Nothing outside of the biblical story has been proven true. So again, when we find so-called artifacts and everything like that, none of it adds up. None of it can be definitively and 100% proven to date back during that time. It's always surrounded with controversy. It's always an issue, because for the life of us, we can't find anything dating these people back during the time where they're supposed to have exist, which is why they're jumping and piggybacking on a lot of other stuff. So again, I had somebody say the Hyksos are the Hebrews. No, because the Hyksos, one, their style, the way they dressed, isn't consistent, or it doesn't fit what is described as the Hebrew dressed, biblically and outside of the Bible as well. So we can show, because the ancient Egyptians actually drew these people. No, it's not the Hyksos. So you have to look at who was around this time, who could fit with these people. And again, the only people that fit with the biblical Jews are the Greeks, as far as actions, conquests. There's no other people, there's no other tribe that we can look at to go and fit with the biblical Jews. It's nobody. It's nothing. So we got to go off of that. We have to go off of what the Greeks doing and see if we can look in history and compare that and pair it with what the Hebrews did. And I broke all that down and showed you guys. The only people that went out conquering during that time was the Greeks. And then, of course, we had the Romans later. But there's nobody who fits that conquest of African people more than the Greeks and the Romans. So again, there is no proof of any Hebrews conquering any Girgashites or Perizzites or Hivites, as I said in the last video. This is what you guys have to find. So I know you guys are upset. A lot of people was mad at that video. A lot of people think they have the answers, and they don't, because every time I get somebody to respond to what I said in the video, what I'm getting is biblical stories. Oh, this biblical character did something in the biblical, book. And the story, nothing outside of the story they're giving us. The biblical story hasn't been proven. So why would we take that as actual proof? We can't do that. So you guys got to ask yourself, what fits? What fits? So either the biblical story is 100% true and we just lost all of the doctrine, all of the manuscripts and everything through history, through time, right? And if that's the case, then how are we ever going to know what was actually said? Because we have manuscripts, but none of them dating towards the time or during the time this stuff's supposed to have happened. So we have to go off of what was copied and the copies and how the copies line up with history, and they do not line up with history. And that's the thing. That's what I've been talking about for years. They don't line up. So we got to go off of what we have, right? And what do we have? We have Ptolemy, right? Ptolemy II Philadelphus giving us the Septuagint Greek that was supposedly written by 72 Hebrew elders, right? So he basically commissioned these Hebrew elders to give us this whole doctrine and not doctrine, just basically the Hebrew law, I should say, because he wanted it for his library, and it don't make sense, right? So we have that. We don't have the manuscripts that was used to give us the Septuagint, right? We only have LXX, the letters of Orestes, basically stating that this is what supposedly had happened to bring the manuscripts into existence, right? So we don't have the actual proof. We only have that. That's one thing. So we got to go by this. We have to take this. We got to run with that. We got to say, you know what? This is what we have. Let's take it. We have the Septuagint. We don't get another Hebrew manuscript until the Masoretic text, right? Now, people say the Dead Sea Scrolls, but remember, the Dead Sea Scrolls have been proven to be fake in museums all over the world. And we don't know what they really say. We don't know if they're absolutely complete. We don't really know. So now the Dead Sea Scrolls are suspect, and it's a question mark. So we got to go with the Masoretic text, which we know is 11th century, right? 10th, 11th century AD, right? So the only thing we have going back towards BC times, Old Testament, Tanakh, Torah, is the Septuagint, right? And we only have like a fucking shard of that fragment. We don't have a full, complete manuscript, BC manuscript of the Septuagint going back during that time. So here we go again, us having to rely on what we have. That's copies of copies of copies, right? Then we take that, right? The Septuagint, we take it to St. Jerome. What did St. Jerome give us? St. Jerome gave us the Vetus Latina, right? The Latin Vulgate. And then we know what happened. It's a whole lot of information on that this guy changed the Septuagint. So now the Septuagint is changed, and a lot of people don't believe it was a faithful translation of the Hebrew, and it doesn't really work in Latin the way they would have it, the way they really wanted to work as far as the translation from Hebrew to Greek or from Hebrew to Latin or what have you. So we have that. So we have to go and now wait all the way until Vetus Latina, Latin Vulgate. Then we have, of course, the Syriac Peshitta. We have all these other manuscripts, right? So it's a lot of different manuscripts that we got to go and wait for and see which one is which. So now everything else is based off of Hebrew Israelite faith, right? Because you're not going to get proof with any of this stuff. So we got to go with that. We're going to just take everything we can find to try to help these people out and give some type of validity to the claims that they have for the Bible. Okay, one, yes, it's old. The story is old. But again, that matches up with the fact that we're going to go back towards the time when the Greeks conquered in Egypt, which that land, that area was populated by black people. The ancient Egyptians was black. The people that was in that land we call Israel was black. These were black people. As I said in the last video, I showed you guys where they had basically created new gods. So we know, and to me, that should be the end all be all right then and there. Was Serapis Christos a real god? Like, come on, let's just think about what we're talking about here. Like, come on. Was Serapis Christos, Zeus Amon, was these people real gods, right? Asclepius, which Asclepius looks like Serapis and looks like Jesus as well. Zeus, were these people real gods, right? So we don't find a doctrine of Serapis or Asclepius or any of these guys as big as we find with Jesus or what have you, or, the main religions or the main gods or prophets or what have you. So we know that these people was created and it was worship. What goes along with that whole thing? So we can look at this and say, one, we know these guys was created. They was being put out there for people to worship. And again, you have to look at that and look at the fact that religions, doctrines, gods was being created for people to worship. And it just so happened that these gods was in the image of the Greeks and fucking Romans, right? So if you want to look at the fact that these people they enslaved black people, right? They gave us a doctrine to basically try to follow and commit, worshiping Serapis. The Greeks did this. Then the Romans took it and piggybacked off of it, right? What are you guys missing? I don't understand. What are you missing? We have this. We have this history. We have this proof that this stuff was created. So if this was created, what makes you think none of the other stuff was created? So they got to look at that, right? So we look at Asclepius, we look at Serapis Christos, we look at the fact that these guys was created for these people to basically worship. So we get Constantine, and Constantine basically says, okay, Christianity, this is the way to go. I'm going to become a Christian. I'm no longer going to be a pagan, right? So we know this was put out there for people to basically be called pagan, to worship other gods other than Rome. So what about Serapis, right? So then now, if you have, as I showed you guys in the last video, if you have this cult, of Serapis, right? You have Asclepius, you have these other guys that these people are clearly, obviously worshiping, right? And they're called the worshipers of Serapis. And again, I showed you where we had Hadrian basically call these people Christians, right? So why wasn't these people called pagans? Why wasn't these people looked at as being derogatory or against the laws or the teachings or the religion of Rome? These people were simply accepted in their worship of a God that's different than the Christian God, than Jesus, right? Think about that. There's nothing out there. They didn't even tell us about Serapis. We didn't learn about Serapis until you went and dug for it. So how is it this big holy war where we have the whole Crusades and all of these wars, these holy wars, and these wars over these gods, and nobody's fighting over Serapis and nobody's fighting over these other ancient gods, but they're fighting over biblical gods? So again, we ask ourselves that question, what fits? What fits? And what fits is that this stuff had to be created. It had to be created for that purpose, the purpose of manipulation and control. And that's exactly what it was. So this stuff was basically created so that Rome would have control of the doctrine that was in power, the ruling doctrine of the day. You look around and you see people worshiping Serapis. You look around and you see people worshiping these other gods. And then now we say Christianity is going to come. Jesus is the God or what have you. And this is the religion that's going to dominate over all these other religions that's out there dominating right now. So we're going to get rid of all this stuff. And what happened? As the Pope came into power, as the church gained strength, what did they do? They started outlawing these other temples, tearing down these other temples, tearing down these other religions, calling people who was in any other type of worship pagans or what have you. And this is what happened. They was gaining control of those regions, of those lands, using religion, right? Nothing else fits. So you got to skip all of that. You got to ignore all of that and simply accept the doctrine, right? Leading all the way up. So remember, Crusades, none of that stuff matters. All of the codices, all of the biblical books, John Huss, John Merriman, all these other Bibles, which is like over 15, 16 Bibles before the King James Version. They want you to ignore all of that and accept the King James Version and what was said as being, depending on what type of Hebrew you is, as being the correct doctrine for Black people, right? We got to skip all that history and say, you know what? God fucked up. He gave it to all these people before us the wrong way. And then finally with King James, he gave us the correct version, which is for the Hebrews who believe that. Because you have different type of Hebrews that believe different things, and I've heard them all. So that's how those people have to look at it, because it don't make sense. If God's supposed to be perfect, then you would think he would get the doctrine perfect the first time. Why would he give the doctrine to your enemy before he give it to you? And then again, they want to say, well, that fits with the biblical story of how the Hebrews was doing wrong. We wasn't ready for the doctrine, and we had to go through slavery and everything we went through before we can get the correct translation from King James, which none of that bullshit fits, right? It's a lot to unravel. So again, I know you guys have a lot of questions. So many people sent me so much. You got to understand, and this is the biggest one that everybody missed. The King James Version was written 1604, 1611, right? Slavery was already in full swing. So when you're looking at Deuteronomy 28 and you thinking it just simply fits with Black history, slavery was already going on. So they just basically wrote about what they knew was already happening to the slaves. That's all. That's all they did. We don't have the manuscript that Moses wrote, supposedly. We don't have any of the original doctrines, the original manuscripts. So you would have to take that the King James Version somehow is perfect or matches with what the original said. And the King James Version doesn't match with the Septuagint. As I broke that down, I showed you Deuteronomy 28:68 and the Septuagint, and I should say Codex Sinaiticus, which the Septuagint is in Codex Sinaiticus. But when you look at Codex Sinaiticus, the King James Version doesn't even match with that, which you can go online and look up yourself, right? So it's certain things like this that you guys have to look at. Now I'm all over the place with this because I have so much on this, because I want to pose to you guys these questions.